we had a Houthi drone attack on Tel Aviv, the former capital of Israel. It got through. It landed, it exploded, it killed one man, injured 10 others. I haven't read it, but I've seen it quoted. Houthi statement reads, this was a new whiz-bang missile. It got through because of its unique technological qualities. Israel, on the other side, says, whoops-a-daisy, it was human error, and we're looking into why this missile got through and why we didn't manage to shoot it down, either using fighter aircraft or using Patriot missiles or whatever else they normally use with such weapons. On the balance of probability, I suspect that Israelis are near the truth on this one. I suspect that it's human error rather than Houthi technological prowess. So yes, the chances are this was an Iranian cruise missile. The Houthis might have added this or that, but it's an Israeli failure to stop rather than a Houthi technological advance. Nonetheless, if you take the BBC, it was, reassuring us only a few days ago that Israel itself wouldn't respond because it's a long way away, that it would rely on America, Britain, and whoever else has got ships, stationed off the coast of Yemen. They would respond instead. And initially, in terms of press reports, when the explosions start in Yemen, and when this oil refinery blows up in flames, 100 deaths, the reports were of a joint action by the US, by Britain, by Israel. But as it turns out, as it seems at least at the moment, this was an operation by Israel. There's no reason to doubt that. Israel has the planes that can refuel mid-air. It has long-range enough aircraft anyway to get there. It could attack Iran. I don't know what the distance is from Israel to Iran, but something of the same order. It attacked, and basically Netanyahu says, well, if you try it again, this is what you'll get, because previous attacks, they've been successful in shooting them down mid-air. This is the first time they've killed an Israeli citizen. And the basic message is, if you kill one of our people, we'll kill 100 of yours. I don't think that will actually stop the Houthis. The BBC and the nature of reporting would be anyway that you can't give the background to everything. But I suspect myself, the fact that there are such a focus of anger by Netanyahu and the Israeli government, this would something actually that would boost their standing domestically in Yemen. Remember, they are not the government. They control North Yemen, most of North Yemen. And we're not dealing now with two different states. Either way, this would boost their standing domestically, but also regionally. So from their point of view, 100 deaths is a price worth paying. We should also comment, I think, on the judgment, year in the making, that's my understanding, of the UN's International Court of Justice. This is by 15 judges. From my memory, this is a majority judgment. So it's 11-4, basically saying that Israel's occupation of Palestinian land, 67, not 48, 67, is illegal. And this isn't to do with settlements This is just the occupation of the land. So we know that Israel not only took over the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, it also, because the Six-Day War in 1967 was a simultaneous war against Jordan, Syria, and Egypt. And Israeli forces also took over the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights has been annexed by Israel. And what's happened is that although Israeli settlers were removed from Gaza, there was never very many of them. The exact opposite has happened on the West Bank. What we've had is Jerusalem has been declared a single city instead of it being divided east and west. It was. It's now one city. It's the official capital of Israel. And of course, what's happened is that settlers have been planted in East Jerusalem and also on the West Bank. And just recently, we've had news of 5 more outposts being announced on the West Bank. I had to look up because we're not talking about police outposts or army outposts. We're talking about settlements. So Israel's colonial settlement program continues on the West Bank. And if we include East Jerusalem, the figure of settlers is something above 600,000 people. Anyway, what we're talking about with this judgment isn't settlement. It's actually the continued occupation of the land. Personally, I wouldn't have thought that particularly controversial, but this matters. It's not because it matters in Israel. It certainly doesn't matter to Netanyahu. Their government didn't even send along any lawyers to, make Israel's case. They just dismissed the judgment as you would expect by saying that the judges were anti-Semites. And interestingly, for next week's Weekly Worker, they also said that we don't need the UN telling us what the land of Israel is. We have Genesis. We have the word of God. Now, I don't know whether Netanyahu is religious. He might, put on a show of being religious, but in his heart, is he really religious? Does he really believe that God, for example, made the world in 6 days and 6 nights, and on the 7th he had a rest? Does he really believe that? Does he really believe that Abraham was promised this land for his descendants? I don't know. I doubt it somehow. But next week we actually have an article by Moshe Machover basically looking at the use of the Bible when we're talking about, of course, the Old Testament, as some from a Christian background would call it, in terms of Zionism and how it uses the Bible to justify its colonialism. So from Netanyahu's point of view, he doesn't care what the UN says. He's putting God above the UN. But it does matter when it comes to US politics. It does matter when it comes to US public opinion. It does matter in Britain more than it matters in Israel. So although the judgment isn't binding, there's no one there that's going to enforce it, we shouldn't dismiss it as mere air. It's somewhere in between. It has symbolic value. And again, we don't deny the role of symbolism in politics. Okay, and of course, what we got from David Lammy, what we got from Keir Starmer, and of course, what we'll get from Joe Biden when he recovers from COVID, is that what we're committed to is a two-state solution. Well, when you've got 700,000 settlers, when you've got Israel turning around and saying, well, this is our land because God gave it to us, This is a piece of nonsense. And of course, the United States will not enforce any UN judgment on Israel. It will not stop the delivery of arms, will not stop diplomatic and financial support for Israel. That will continue. And therefore, what we will have de facto is a one state, a Zionist state. And then you've got the problem for Zionism. What are we going to do with these people? Are we going to give them a vote as they've got in Israel proper? No. There are too many Palestinians to make that a safe option. So what you've got to do is keep these people under military occupation. You've got to have an apartheid state, or you've got to get rid of these people. And you've either got to get rid of them by having a second Nakba and moving them over the other side of the Jordan, or moving them out of Gaza into the Sinai. You have the ultimate solution of letting them die, as is quite conceivable in Gaza, for example. Our own approach is that two states is delusional. The United States, the EU, no one is going to enforce that. Israel refuses to accept it. But we also say that you're not going to get justice. You're not going to get rapprochement between the Israeli nation, or Hebrew nation would be a more accurate description, and the Palestinian nation, with a one state solution. I've already described the Zionist project for a one state, but the project that the left puts forward is delusional, because it's based on the idea that you can win the Israeli Jewish population to accept one state, or force it upon them using arms. Well, look at the present situation, both on the West Bank and in Gaza, to see that the Palestinians clearly are incapable of doing that. They're in no position of where they're militarily superior to Israel. Israel is the regional superpower, and the only viable agency that, at least at the present time, the left could possibly conceive of to enforce such a settlement is something like a Muslim Brotherhood Egyptian government lined up with Hamas, lined up with their fellow thinkers in Jordan, Syria. But that wouldn't be democratic. That wouldn't be secular. That would be something of a reactionary nightmare. And what we can guarantee, I think, pretty safely, for example, just a bit of science fiction and magic the United States out of the formula, what we know under such circumstances is the majority of the Israeli population would fight, tooth and claw against such an outcome. And so what the left is proposing is forcing the Jewish Israeli population, the Hebrew nation, into unity. That's not a Marxist program. What we need to have for is a rapprochement between the two peoples, and not the only, but the most likely, the most viable candidate for that is really the sort of program that Moshe and his comrades were putting forward in the early 60s, of an Arab revolution led by the working class. It has to be said, here we're sitting in 2024. There's a lot less reason now to be optimistic about strategic perspective than there was in the 60s. So Arab unity was a real living, much less so now. But nonetheless, some sort of regional solution. It's clear that there is common feeling in the Arab world for the Palestinian population. They view them as one of their own. But what we're proposing here is a wider regional solution, a solution where the working class takes the lead in the overthrow of the House of Saud, the Hashemite kingdom in Jordan, but crucially, the overthrow of the army regime in Egypt. Egypt is by far the most important Arab country by far. Anyway.